Well, joining me now to discuss the consequences of the U.S. leaving the INF Treaty is Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Jane Duff, a retired U.S. Marine and now a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. Jessie Jane, thanks for being here. President Trump,
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, sure. President Trump and Secretary of State Pompeo are both arguing the treaty has been an obstacle, a constraint to being fully prepared for war. Is that true?
Well, Russia has blatantly overlooked this treaty for some time. And when Putin basically advertised a hypersonic missile just over a year ago, it really gave pause to the United States that they were bragging that they were going to go beyond this treaty already as it is, and they already have. So at what point does the United States say we have to prepare ourselves, because we also could be at risk of being at war with China at some point? You've got North Korea, that's a threat, and this treaty in itself has limited the U.S. capabilities. We've seen an uprising throughout the world beyond just Russia. At the time that this treaty was made, it was the old Soviet Union. And now we have other threats that are in every corner. China has been extremely aggressive. Look at the South China Sea, how they are building up their arms over there. And we know that this is a threat. And Russia in itself has continually provoked the Middle East tensions within Syria, and even now is it being engaged in Venezuela. So I think the United States is taking this very seriously and moving forward so that we can defend ourselves and our allies.
But you know, the White House says withdrawing fully from the treaty will take 6 months, even though all U.S. obligations under the treaty are being suspended now. You know, there are many Democrats in Congress and some arms control advocates who say this withdrawal will lead to an arms race. Is that what happens next year?
I don't expect an arms race. I mean, there's nothing to gain when you start building up the way we did during the Cold War. The Cold War was literally that so frigid that there was no communications that should have been happening. I think President Trump is not a wartime president. He's made that very clear by withdrawing our troops from the Middle East. He is trying to denuclearize North Korea. He's been very aggressive with Iran and their nuclear capability. This is not a man who has been sitting back idly and trying to provoke war with anyone, but at the same time, defending the United States and the American people and our Western allies has always been very clear. He will not tolerate any misbehavior by Russia. And Putin, keep in mind, still has a lot of that Soviet Union mindset because he was a big leader in that rabble-rousing that they used to provoke.
The president also talked about having the U.S. moving forward with developing its own military options going forward. I mean, what could those options be?
Well, the missile capabilities that we need now will have to include some of the new risks that are presenting themselves. And some of those risks also include North Korea. They also include China. And at the time when this treaty was made, Soviet Union was really the big risk that the entire world was shuddering over. Now we have this precarious position that we are seeing with China basically having an influence all over the world on different levels. And they are not under any obligation of this treaty. So we cannot find ourselves disabled with a threat such as China in the near future or even the potential future. And with North Korea, they've got missiles that can extend all the way to the United States. I think the United States has to regroup. Hey, we can always go back to the treaty table with Russia if needed, but right now, until they're under compliance, they've got 6 months to get it together. And if they can't do it in 6 months, they never were sincere.
So do you think China is the bigger threat here, or is it North Korea?
Well, I think China's the bigger threat because they enable North Korea. China's the one that funds a lot of the North Korean activities. We obviously, if China doesn't keep North Korea under control, there will be no control. So China has a big influence, and China's very aggressive. We see them with Taiwan, we see them in the South China Sea, and they have an influence even in parts of Africa. So we have to watch them very closely. When you're no longer capable of defending yourself, you then can easily be attacked. Having a strong defense prevents being attacked.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, though, has left the door open for this treaty to be saved, saying, you know, he's going to give it 6 months and take a look at it. I mean, is there any hope for this to come back around?
Of course there is hope. I think, though, that Putin will recognize that the United States takes its obligations with national security very seriously, particularly under this president. We have essentially pulled out of the Iranian nuclear deal. We're not going to mess with anybody who wants to build up their nuclear arsenal and become a threat to Israel or the Middle East. Putin knows that we will put a bomb on Syria when they had done chemical warfare against their own people. We're very abrupt and we're very quick, but at the same time, we're very thoughtful in how we are presenting our defense by withdrawing our troops from some of the countries where we know that it's become to no avail. But Putin knows that this president means business. He says what he means, and he means what he says.
Well, let's hope so, at least. I mean, if Putin can, be predicted, I think we'd all like to know. Jessie Jane Duff, thank you for being here. We will see what happens as the days progress.